So, good morning again. Welcome to First Parish, Unitarian Universalist, Canton. I'm Felisa White, and I will be your worship associate this morning. I am joined this morning by our minister, Reverend Dr. Clyde Grubbs, and our ministerial intern, Elizabeth Foster. This community honors diversity and joyfully welcomes all who share the values and principles of our congregation. We are glad you have chosen to worship with us today. We hope you find your time with us to be meaningful. At this time, I will turn it over to Reverend Clyde for the call to worship.
Good morning. Today we come together to reflect on a story. The story of Moses and the children of Israel, one of the most powerful stories ever told. And who, according to the story, the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt and were freed by the Most High by sending Moses and inflicting plagues on the Egyptians. A powerful story, a story that shaped history, but it's not a historical event. The Hebrews were a hill country in the land of Canaan. Their language was the same as the people who lived on the plains near the sea, the Canaanites. It is possible a small contingent of Hebrews were slaves in the land of Egypt, but there is no evidence of any record of hundreds of thousands of people being slaves in the land of Egypt and being freed by Moses and his siblings Aaron and Miriam. It is a founding story like many of the founding stories by ancient peoples to claim title to land that they had migrated to and bestowed a mission or purpose of their nation. King Arthur and the Knights, the original dynasty of the Chinese, the original instructions of the Cherokee, all kinds of stories. There's stories of how the people came to be. But stories form community and people form community. I also do history, and this is not history. Nevertheless, we're going to build the whole service around this important story because it's one of the most impactful stories ever told. So let us light our chalice and recall this much-told story. The chalice is lit. Okay. So please join in singing Go Down Moses.
Let my people go, oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. The Lord told Moses what to do. Let my people go to lead the children of Israel through. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. As Israel stood by the water's side, let my people go. At God's command it did divide. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. When they had reached the other shore, let my people go. They let the song of triumph soar. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
Good morning. So I have a couple of instructions before we begin our story, and Diane is going to kindly help me out with a little bit of our story this morning. I'm glad you are all so warmed up with that song, because we're going to do it again. We would normally ask any young folks in our congregation to do this, but we don't have that right now, so Clyde and I are going to ask if you all want to be children at heart and do a little bit of marching today. So there's no need to participate if you don't want to march around the sanctuary, but if you are up for it, when I say so, we're going to all try to gather in the back corner, and we're going to do a little march, a little marching at a couple points through this story. So I will tell you when it's time to do that, but you can think about if you're feeling like you want to have your inner child march with you today in our story. It'll be great. I'm also going to give you just a little bit of context for this story. It's a story about Rosa Parks, who I'm sure that folks are familiar with, but when I tell this story, I just like to be clear that what Rosa Parks was doing, although she was an incredibly courageous woman, was not something where she just got tired and decided to sit down on the bus one day. She was the secretary of the local NAACP chapter, and what she did was part of a planned protest. And it did get much bigger than they anticipated and turned into a full-spread Boy Scout, which was not necessarily the goal, but what she did was planned, and she was a brilliant woman who is working with a bunch of other folks. I also want to lift up really quickly the story of Claudette Colvin, who was actually one of the first folks to get arrested for protesting by sitting in the wrong place on the bus, but she was not used as the face of this protest because she was a 15-year-old girl who was pregnant out of wedlock, so they just didn't think it would make like a good news story at the time. But she did go on to win she was one of the plaintiffs in the court case that desegregated the buses, so she was still pretty involved. So that's just some background for our story. But this story is by Christopher Buese, and it's called Let My People Go. So once upon a time, there was a little girl named Rosa Parks who loved to read her Bible. One of her favorite stories was the story of Moses and how he helped the Hebrew slaves gain freedom. Moses was a young man who lived in Egypt. He knew it wasn't right for the Hebrew people to be slaves of the Egyptian Pharaoh. One day he heard a voice tell him, "Moses, go tell Pharaoh to let my people go." Moses decided that he had to listen and go see Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And when the Hebrew people saw Moses walking towards Pharaoh's palace, a voice in their hearts began to sing. And you can sing along with Diane if you like.
Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
But when Moses told Pharaoh to free the Hebrew people from slavery, Pharaoh simply said, no, 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 no. Moses said, be careful, Pharaoh. All God's children were born to be free. You may be a king, but every child of God has royal blood. No one on earth was born to be a slave. You may say slavery is good, but the powers of the earth and sun will rebel against that lie. The waters will turn red. The land will be filled with millions of frogs, gnats, flies, and bugs. Cows, horses, and donkeys will get sick. Hailstorms will send ice falling from the sky that will beat down everything growing in the fields. Egypt will be filled with locusts, and then darkness will come over the land, turning day into night. Pharaoh, you are on the side of slavery, but the universe is on the side of justice. And everything Moses said came to pass. Bad things started happening. Bugs, frogs, you name it, it happened. Sometimes Pharaoh would get sick and tired of all the misery, and he would tell Moses and the Hebrew people, you are free to go. But as soon as the Hebrew people started packing their bags, Pharaoh would say, I've changed my mind. And so they would unpack their bags. But finally, Pharaoh got tired of fighting against the cause of freedom. He got sick and tired of frogs in his food and gnats in his ears. He realized that the universe was on the side of justice, and he told Moses and his people to go. And now it is time to get up and march. So if you want to participate in our march, you can head to right over that corner of the sanctuary. And we're going to march a little bit, and then we're going to have some more story, and then we're going to march a little bit more. You can also be a spectator to our march, which is very important as well. And they did go. Moses and the Hebrew people marched right out of Egypt singing, ain't gonna let no Pharaoh turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let no Pharaoh turn me around, I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching into freedom land. Okay, we're gonna pause our march just for one moment, and we're gonna have a little more story, and then we're gonna march again. You can sit down for a moment, or you can stay standing in your march, whatever you wanna do. So Rosa loved to hear this story of Moses and the Hebrew slaves marching to freedom. But as she grew up, she got bigger and taller. She began to look around her at the world in which she lived, and she realized something. She realized that her people were not free. Everywhere Rosa looked, there were signs that said whites only. Black people were not allowed in some parks, motels, lunch counters, swimming pools, and schools. They were told to sit at the back of the bus. If a white person needed the seat, then the black person had to stand up and give up their seat. Rosa believed that all people should be treated fairly, and she knew in her heart that these rules were wrong. A lot of other people agreed with her, and they agreed that they needed to challenge these unfair rules. One day, Rosa got on the bus, tired after a long day's work, and she sat down. The bus went down the street a few blocks and stopped to let a lot of people who were mostly white on board. The bus driver told some of the black passengers, including Rosa, to get up from their seats so the white folk could sit down. Everyone obeyed the driver, except Rosa. The bus driver told her again to get up, but she still sat in her seat. The driver threatened to call the police, but Rosa still sat in her seat. Finally, the police came to take Rosa down to the station, and as the other passengers watched the police take Rosa away, there was a song in their hearts, and we're going to sing a new version of this. Thanks again.
Go down, Rosa, way down in Alabama, tell America, let my people go.
And if you didn't get the words yet, don't worry, we're going to do it again when we start marching again. At the police station, they fined Rosa $14, which was kind of a lot of money at the time. But she had started something the police could not stop. The black people of Montgomery, Alabama, decided they would not ride the buses until all people were treated fairly. Now, in Egypt, suffering meant frogs, flies, and rivers turning red. In America, suffering meant losing money. And the people started to take to the streets and march for their freedom. So we're going to start our march again while we finish the story, and we're going to do a little singing. And after a year of boycotting and marching by black people, the bus company took down their whites-only signs, and Rosa sat on the front seat of that bus. Rosa Parks had started a movement to lead her people from oppression toward equality. And we're going to finish our marching by singing another version of another round of our new song.
Go down, Rosa, way down in Alabama. Tell America, let my people go. Go down, Rosa, way down in Alabama. Tell America, let my people go.
And thank you for participating. You can now march right back to your seats. And we will continue with our service. This prayer is a new prayer that was just shared this week by UU minister Reverend Leon Soto, and I just thought it was appropriate for our theme this morning, so I'm going to share it with you all, and then we'll spend a little time in meditation together. You are who I love, people lighting the chalice in hundreds of places, thousands of tongues of fire singing the message. All are loved, we matter and belong. You are who I love, elders reaching for the tools that keep us both safe and together. You are who I love, parents holding tenderly all the risk and waiting. You I love, kids who are dreaming of days of summer, hot and golden, and freedom. You are who I love, the still afraid one, frowning and wondering if everything can ever be okay again. Beloved, yes. Where the sun rises, the hope of healing also shines. You are who I love, the keeper of the covenant, the emblem of our care. We each arrive imagining what's possible and come away festooned with an abundance of love and a bone-deep experience of grace. And we're just going to hold a few moments of silent reflection together. Amen.
The drums were beating. People were singing and clapping and stomping. It was a service at a Boston church. It was August 1974, and the schools were going to be desegregated that week. This was a celebration. When the preacher began to preach, he held a big shepherd's staff, and instead of his minister's robe, he had on his shoulders a simple Muslim striped cloth robe, much like a shepherd. He retold the story of Moses confronting the Pharaoh, and as he progressed, it became apparent that the Pharaoh was the Boston School Committee. And the children of Israel were the African American children of Boston. And the exodus that was going to happen would involve children freely going to all the Boston schools. Let our children go to school. The preacher made clear that the school committee's heart was hard indeed and required many plagues in the form of court decisions and to relent and let the children go to school. After the sermon, one of the Boston's well-known Jewish rabbis gave some closing words indicating he thought the sermon had made the Exodus story come alive for this generation, just as the story had come alive for so many generations past. A living story after 3,000 years. So let's recap the story. The children of Israel are enslaved in Egypt. Moses is the hero of the story, and Moses had escaped from Egypt after assaulting an Egyptian slave driver and ended up tending sheep for his father-in-law, Jethro. According to the story, a voice speaks to Moses out of a burning bush and tells Moses to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, it is not uncommon for the heroes to argue with God, to argue with the God of gods, the King of the universe. So the Hebrew Bible does not have a lot of meek, okay, you're the boss, from Moses. There's none of that. He protests, I am not a leader, Moses said. The Pharaoh won't take me seriously. And each time the voice takes the time to answer Moses in detail and give him instructions on what to say and how to act. And Moses asked God, what should I call you? They're going to ask me, who sent me? If the people ask who sent me, what should I say? And the raw voice replies, I am who I am. And say to them, I am sent you. Now, he could have said, we could spend the rest of the worship service just pondering this. God is the verb to be, the first person singular. I am. Or is God saying I am existence itself? But we're going to leave that till later, maybe next year. Being itself. All that has been and all that shall be. So they left Egypt and now we're free. Oh wait, it wasn't that easy. Depart to sea. Miriam, Moses' big sister, leads all the women of Israel in song to the sea, which parts allowing safe passage for Israel, yet closes in and defeats the armies of Egypt. And then the children of Israel just wander into the wilderness for 40 years to overcome their internalized oppression and other marks of slavery and become a people united by common covenant and promise. Finally, they must camp overlooking their destination, glimpsing at the promised land, while they bury Moses, who has come as far as he can come. He will not live to see the culmination of his work as a liberating leader. That's a theme in a lot of literature. The themes of this epic will be recalled again and again in human history, and anyone who has been involved in a community in transition will recognize the humanity of these people. While the Israelites are moving from bondage to freedom, they're not plaster saints, they're not comic book heroes. They are frightened of the unknown. They quarrel with each other. They complain. Not enough food, not enough water. What are we doing out here in this desert? It is these small human touches that humanize this 3,000-year-old story. We recognize this in our own struggles. Complaining, gossiping. Even when we want to change, even when the going gets rough, we complain about the change in the midst of the change. So the question is, why has this story become such a strong influence on people for the last 3,000 years? There is a vision contained in the story from the very beginning. The Israelites will journey to the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So the utopian ideal is built into the story. And in order for them to inherit the land, they must be transformed. They must become a holy people. They must become an ethical people. To inherit the land of promise, they must become themselves a people of promise. And they must do it together. In the Hebrew Bible, the Israelites considered the experience of being a slave to be a memorable event. We find many passages in the scripture that make this point. For example, from the book of Deuteronomy we read, "Thou shalt not oppress a hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or a stranger in the land. For thou must remember that you were bondsmen in Egypt. Or this from the book of Exodus. You shall not oppress the stranger, for you know the soul of the stranger, having been strangers in the land of Egypt. And this goes, there are about 150 such references in the Hebrew Scriptures. The Exodus story is a source of, has a source of injustice, the Pharaoh, and there is a solution. Let the people go so that they together can journey to the promised land. We must be free of slavery as a people. Get the slavery out of our bodies. As a result of this experience, we must be a just people. We must not enslave other peoples. We cannot mistreat strangers in the land. And again, becoming a just and holy people is a conscious decision. It requires commitment. It requires creating covenant and keeping covenant and promising to abide with each other, returning to covenant when we fail to abide. We cannot be liberated as individuals. That's important. Liberation is done in community. And if we are to have justice, we must be just. This is a radically new concept. It assigns agency to a community and it asks individuals to participate in others in the community outcome. Far different from the fates that ruled over the Greeks, the blind forces of karma that determine one's life in India. We can choose to be or not to be in loving community. We can choose. The story becomes part of the preaching and singing of African slaves in the American South. Then it was an organizing principle for the freed slaves as they aspired to create community in the face of racism. The story was told by bands of Cherokee along the Trail of Tears, and the notion of just community was an inspiration to those same Cherokee as they tried to reconstruct community in Oklahoma. The people of South Africa sang of the Exodus and looked to Nelson Mandela as their Moses, inspiring them to a free South Africa. What is the lesson for us today? Are we Egypt? Is America a house of bondage for Mexican and Guatemalan workers? For black youth facing violence and a repressive police system? Is it a house of bondage for the 500 indigenous nations living along a trail of broken treaties? Who else do we make strangers of in our land? Do we work to guarantee that justice is done, that right relations are guaranteed, that every one of us shares in the promise? The Exodus story continues to inform human communities. Sometimes it inspires social justice. Sometimes it inspires narrow self-interest and conquest. For example, those English who settled New England regarded themselves as the children of Israel and the native peoples as savages. Puritan preachers called the natives Canaanites, with disastrous consequences for the people of this land. Yes, the Exodus story continues to inform people and shape popular consciousness, but the story continues to ask those who hear it, together we can build a promised land that will be the beloved community of all. Let it be. Let us sing. Faith of a Larger Liberty, number 287. Number 287 in the gray hymnal. I share this Arafafo wisdom. Hear my benediction. When we show respect for other living things, then life herself responds with respect for us. Walk now in the way of wisdom. Walk in peace. Go in love.